Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Tanks with the mighty Jingles. It's tank review time. Haven't done one of these for a while. And it's a Chinese tank review. I have actually found a Chinese tank that I like. And it's a Chinese medium tank. Oh my god, what's going on? It's the T-34-1. As you're probably all aware, I'm not a huge fan of tanks that have bad gun depression. And the T-34-1 kind of does have bad gun depression. But for some reason, and I can't quite put my finger on why, I've had a lot of success with this tank. So we're going to flash up Tank Inspector and we'll have a look at what makes this thing tick and see if we can figure out why I like this tank above all of the other Chinese mediums. So, the stock T-34-1, and looking at it, it definitely bears similarities to the T-34-85. Although not quite to the same degree that the previous tank, the Type 58 at Tier 6 did. The Type 58 was just a clear clone of the T-34-85. What they tried to do with the T-34-1 was this really represented the first time Chinese engineers tried to make a tank their own, instead of just doing a straightforward copy of an existing Russian design. They changed the transmission compartment and the suspension, which allowed them to save weight and reduce the height of the hull. And you can quite clearly see from looking at it that it is a much lower profile tank. They also messed around with the idea of fitting various different turrets and guns to it. What you're looking at here is a completely stock, well, it's not completely stock, but externally a completely stock T-34-1. And stock, it is not very good. However, once you've got some of the upgrades for it, and we're specifically talking about the turret, it suddenly turns into quite an interesting machine. Let's have a look at the armour values, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Now, the hull, as you'd expect, being based on a T-34-85, is not very well armoured at all. The front is 60mm on the upper glacis, the join between the upper and lower glacis is 75, the lower glacis and the side armour is only 45mm thick. The rear is even worse at 40. But the turret is actually very, very strong once you get the upgraded turret. It's 170mm thick at the front, thinning to 150 at the side. Further towards the rear of the side, it's 120mm thick. And then you have various different armour zones at the rear, which are all uniformly awful, 60, 80, and 50. But it's the frontal turret armour that makes this thing interesting. Now, the reason why I just don't really get along with Chinese mediums is that up until now they've all had universally awful gun depression. However, this is a tank that has a good turret front, and like the T-29, the T-32, the T-30 American tanks, tanks that have great frontal turret armour which can get themselves into hold down positions and have good gun depression can be very, very, very strong tanks. So what's the gun depression like on this thing? Well, it turns out it's actually just as bad as the Type 58 and the Type T-34. They all have 5 degrees of gun depression. And yet somehow I managed to make this tank work in ways that I just couldn't with the Type T-34. And I think that might be because this thing has a much bigger gun than the Type T-34. And whereas with the Type T-34 you have to use the rate of fire and just peck away at the target, which involves exposing yourself to return fire a lot more than you do with this thing, which takes nearly 9 seconds to reload its 100mm gun and does 320 damage with each shot. So you don't have to stick around waiting for return fire to come your way for nearly as long as you have to do on the Type T-34 or the Type 58. Also, anything that does come your way, well, you've got that 170mm of turret armour, which is just as likely of taking the hit as the front of your hull. So, back to the garage. What about the rest of the tank? Well, with 1050 hit points, it's square in the middle of the average amount of health for a Tier 7 medium. There's nothing special about that, but there's nothing bad about that either. The power to weight ratio of, where is it? there we go, 15.83 is actually not bad either. It's quite comparable to the KV-13. It's not as good as the Comet, but it's certainly not a slow tank. It will do 50 kilometers per hour. It's very manoeuvrable, 42-degree traverse speed. The turret also turns pretty quickly, with 44-degree turret traverse as well. The view range isn't bad, 370 meters, and 750 meter signal range on the radio. What about the guns? Again, it's kind of good news. Your stock gun is pretty awful, and then there's an intermediate 85mm gun, and then the top 100mm gun. And I think the combination of this thing's frontal turret armour and that 100mm gun is what makes this tank for me. Now, the stock 85mm is absolutely awful. It's fast rate of fire, but it only has 126mm of penetration. It only does 160 damage. It's horribly inaccurate, but the aiming time's okay, 2.3 seconds. That's really all it has going for it. So screw that gun. Then we have this gun. It's an intermediate 85mm. Again, same rate of fire. Penetration's better, but it's still terrible, 128. Same damage. It's more accurate. Has the same relatively fast 2.3 second aiming time. But this is the gun that you're probably going to want to use. The 100mm 44-100 JT. The rate of fire is half of the rate of fire on the 85mm. But the penetration is infinitely better. It's 175mm of penetration. That is really, really good for a tier 7 medium tank. Obviously the Panther with the L100 75mm rules the roost there with its 198mm of penetration. But there are plenty of tier 7 medium tanks in the game who wish they had 175mm of penetration. 235 with premium ammo, which in the case of this tank is not high explosive anti-tank ammo, it's armor-piercing composite rigid ammo. The accuracy is not great, 0.42, and unfortunately the aiming time is pretty bad, 2.9 seconds. But the damage output isn't bad at all, 250 average damage, which gives this thing a damage per minute, I'm looking at the wrong tank, there it is, of 1613. Now, before you start getting too excited, 1600 damage per minute is actually not that good on a tier 7 medium. In fact, it's pretty poor. The KV-13 has 200 damage per minute more than this. The Comet has over 500 damage per minute more than the T-34-1. But the KV-13 and the Comet work in a different way to the T-34-1. With the KV-13 and the Comet, they have very rapid firing guns that mean that they, in order to achieve that theoretical high DPM, they have to keep that gun firing at their targets. The T-34-1, in common with the T-20, has an alpha damage gun. You roll out, you take your shot, you get back into cover to reload and do it again, or relocate and take the shot from a different position while you're reloading. And it's even better at it than the T-20 is. The T-20 is a faster tank than the T-34-1, but not by much, and the T-34-1 is more manoeuvrable than the T-20, and unlike the T-20, it also has good turret armour. It doesn't hurt that the 100mm gun also has better alpha damage, 250 average damage. So, what we're actually seeing here at tier 7 with the T-34-1 is the first taste that you're going to get of what, for many people, is considered the defining characteristic of Chinese medium tanks, other than the awful gun depression. Chinese medium tanks are unique in that they get the option of fitting the kind of gun that most people wouldn't consider out of place on a comparable tier heavy tank. And that is what makes the Chinese mediums different, and you get the first taste of it here at tier 7 on the T-34-1. So, let's see how it works. So, to get us warmed up, we're going to take a look at some various examples of specific good points and bad points on the tank. Starting with that old favourite, god-awful gun depression. You can see here, I literally have to drive out of that bush through the other side in order to point this tank's gun at the side of that tank destroyer. The good thing is that no other tank in the game, based on the chassis of a T-34, would ever have bounced a shot from the front the way this thing did when that shell hit its turret. Now, don't be tempted into thinking that just because you've got a good turret front, you're a T-29, a T-30, a T-32. You can't make it work the way the Americans do because they've got the gun depression that you haven't. Now, over to my right there, you'll see Circumflexer. He can make this work because the patch of ground that he's on enables him to keep the rear of his tank at a higher angle, which means he doesn't have to move as far forward as I do in this position in order to point my gun at the targets. That's why I've been hit badly and he hasn't. But the second these guys get a little bit of backup and start getting cocky and pushing forward, thinking, well, it's only 2 medium tanks, we can take them, they put themselves into a position where I can finally start hitting them with relative impunity. And it's kind of counterintuitive. If you're used to driving American heavy tanks, you have to put this tank into what feels like a much more risky position. But it does work. And because we're now in a position where we can finally bring our guns to bear on the targets and only expose our turret fronts, the fact that we're outnumbered nearly 2 to 1 doesn't make any difference because these guys just can't penetrate the front of our turrets. And when you're sitting in a position of relative impunity like this, you have 275mm of penetration and 250 average damage. It really doesn't take long until you've turned the tables on the enemy tanks, and they're suddenly not feeling quite so brave as they were a few minutes ago. In fact, at this stage they've all but given up shooting at me in circumflexes. They've bounced so many shots off the front of our turrets. And they've actually started shifting their fire to the heavy tanks that are coming up behind us. Well, almost all of them. This one's going to be heavily edited because it's a Comoran game, and like most games on Comoran, there are very, very long stretches where absolutely nothing happens. This is a spot that I do like to get into when I'm on Comoran, you know, when I have the massive misfortune for this map to be next in the rotation, but it is a spot that I do like to get into in my medium tanks. You do need a pretty quick medium tank though. And this is a spot that does work particularly well for the T-34-1 because it's not like an American tank. It can't quite use ridgelines the way an American tank can. This thing really does need to be on flat ground, but hold down behind a slight rise in the ground in front of it, rather than crawling up a hill and being able to shoot down the reverse slope of the hill the way an American tank can. From this position, you're in a relatively good place to spot enemy tanks that try to come around the edge of the island here and help direct artillery fire on them. And you're also in a good position to spot any sneaky enemies that try to rush up to the farmhouse on my left. Now, of course, in a tier 9 game like this, you really don't have the firepower to prevent the enemy team from getting into these buildings if they're determined enough about it. But just the fact that you're sitting here is a massive impediment to the enemy team. If they want to advance any further than that, they first have to deal with you. And all the while you're sitting here, you're keeping them spotted for the rest of your team. Remember, it's not all about doing the damage yourself, particularly when you're in this kind of situation, a tier 7 medium in a very campy tier 9 match. The T-34-1 actually has pretty good camo rating. It's not as good as a light tank, but it's got among the best camo rating of any of the tier 7 mediums. And the fact that I cannot actually bring my gun to bear on these two tanks while sitting behind this bush and remaining in cover is actually not a bad thing, Because if I could shoot at these guys, I probably would be tempted to shoot at these guys, and that would just give my position away and get me killed. And right now, the single best thing I can be doing for my team is keeping these two guys lit up and not dying. And of course, when the moment's right, you're of no further value to the team as the spotter, and it's time to actually start taking the shots when you're confident you're not going to die doing it. That's when you move out. And your patience is rewarded with lots of easy kill steals, even though there's no such thing as kill stealing in World of Tanks. And them fat juicy artillery kills for being a good tier 7 medium tank in a tier 9 game and not dying uselessly in the first 5 minutes. Here's a game I was sure was going to end in disaster. But this is going to highlight the manoeuvrability and mobility of the T-34-1, as well as the sheer incompetence of certain Tier 8 premium heavy tank drivers. I'm in my T-34-1, obviously, as is Quickie Baby. Well, he's not in my T-34-1. That would be a bit too crowded. He's in his own. Oh god, that was stupid. It sounded much funnier in my head. We're also joined by Ike in his IS-2. It's not a tier 9 match, but it's not a tier 7 match either. You know, this is pretty average matchmaking for this tank. Certainly nothing to complain about. First tank spotted. AMX 5100. We both shoot. He bounces. I don't. That turret front, man. It's for winners. So the AMX driver's cursing, because popping out to take that shot at me just revealed his position and got him hammered by the rest of the team. But suddenly a wild IS-3 appears, and that's a tree falling over by the building, and that T-29 is getting very close, and suddenly, oh my god, it's a lurver. Okay, I'm not feeling very confident at this stage. And I'm hit by artillery, and I've had my tracks blown off. You know, as well as the small matter of losing half of my health in one hit, and at this point on the live stream, I was just yelling, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. But I started backing off, and I kept the lurver between myself and the IS-3 so they couldn't concentrate their firepower on me. I kept moving, bounced a shot from the lurver off the turret front, and made it out of there alive, taking no further damage. So, largely down to the incompetence of the lurver driver, I managed to get out of there in one piece. But I'm still not in an ideal position. I can't go any further forward from here. But at the same time, I don't really want to abandon this position entirely, because I'm effectively the eyes and ears of the team who are sitting behind me there, namely Ike in his IS-2, ready to support me if these guys try to push the corner. So, that we know of, we have an IS-3 and a Type 58 in front of us. The T-29's trying to go around the other side to my right, but there's a KV-13 and Quickie Baby keeping him pinned down. Type 58 gets a bit too aggressive there. Ike plants one right into him with his 122mm gun, then the IS-3 comes around the corner. He's got his sights on Ike. Take my time, I need to make this count. Get a shot in. Unfortunately, we have to sacrifice Ike to him, and Quickie Baby arrives just a second too late to save Ike, but between the three of us, we've taken 2/3 of this IS-3's health off. Now, situation not looking great. That IS-3 is not alone. He does have tank destroyer support on the hill behind him. Pushing around, trying to finish off the IS-3 would not be the smart move. And Quickie Baby is recommending we try to fall back to the position where Ike died, where this KV-13 is sitting on the corner, and concentrate our fire on this T-29 instead. Deal with the threat to our flank, then we can worry about the IS-3. Unfortunately, this is where our shooting started to really, really suck. And we make a real dog's dinner out of killing this T-29. We really, really should have been able to kill him far sooner than this. If we'd not sucked quite so much at killing that T-29, we would both now be in a position to already have been turned around and helping that KV-13 against the IS-3. But he'd ended up not needing our help because 1, he did a great job himself, and 2, he had an ISU with him. And I think it's fairly safe to say that the IS-3 really didn't like the taste of them apples. And I'll just do some sneaky extra damage to this poor little A-20 who never did me any harm. And that was pretty much it for that game. That one ended up being a nice comfortable 15-4 victory. Anyway, on to the main event. This is my ace tanker game in the T-34-1. Unfortunately, this game does come with a disclaimer. In this match, you're going to see me acting like a dick. It's El Khalouf. It's not my favourite map. It's a tier 7 game. I'm in the T-34-1. I'm platooned up with Quickie Baby, who's in his Cherie. And that 3002D in front of us is shortly going to become the target of my undeserved rage. That guy, probably for no fault of his own, is going to go AFK at the worst possible moment for me. And I'm going to panic, and I'm going to lose my temper, and I'm going to act like a dick. I'm certainly not proud of it, but there's no point in trying to hide it, or try to, pretend it was anything other than me being a dick, because that's exactly what you're about to see happen. But anyway, on with the game. Don't worry, it's going to happen soon. So, we've made it down into the river mouth. The 3002D is pushed ahead, and he's the one getting these initial spots off, but he's immediately threatened by an enemy tiger, so get a little stuck on the corner, but then I get around and I do what I can to help him out. Not the only ones shooting at the tiger. This tiger's in a bad spot. Right? He should not be hanging around here just to try and deal with one 3002D. Everybody up on the ridgeline there has got shots at him. 3002D's doing a good job defending himself. Tiger dies. And right there, I lose half of my health. Probably that KV-2. Not entirely sure. The amount of damage I took is consistent with a KV-2 high explosive shell. If that was the case, I was really lucky. It didn't kill any of my crew, and it didn't knock any of my modules out. But regardless of who actually did the damage, I have just lost almost half of my health right at the start of the match, and this did not put me in a great frame of mind. So I'm sitting here on the corner waiting to disappear off the enemy team's radar, and then I move around to support the 3002D. Now, I don't realise it yet, but he has actually gone AFK. Look at the position his turret's in. It's not going to move for the rest of the game. So, I'm down here behind this rock, thinking I do actually have some backup. I pop up, take a look. I know I've been spotted. Artillery taking a pop at me. I wasn't actually trying to get the gun down. I know I don't have the gun depression to hit anything camping on the ridge up there, but I just wanted to try to spot some targets. And it seems to have worked, even if I didn't see what was shooting at me, and there's an artillery hit. It's that bishop. That bishop had a massive, raging hard-on for me this entire game. But don't worry, I get my revenge. Okay. Where are they? Oh, crap. T-29. Really did not need that. So, and this is where it all starts going to hell. There's a T-29 coming around to get me. It's not just the T-29. Artillery's raining shots down on me. There's a KV-2 lobbing shells at me whenever he can. There's a T-34-85 about to appear behind me. And my only backup has just gone AFK. Now, Quickie Baby comes over in his Cherie to take the pressure off me with the T-29. And I am lucky that that VK3002D is there, because he takes the first shot from that T-34-85. But at the time, that I'm not taking that into consideration. I'm being shot at from 3 or 4 different directions by 3 or 4 different tanks, and the one guy is in the best position to actually help me out on my team has gone to the toilet, or has decided to go and walk his dog, or has disconnected, and for whatever reason, he's not helping. And so it's around about now where I realise, oh my god, this guy is AFK. And that is when I act like an angry little teenager. So now you can all say, oh my god, Jingles is a dick, and be right, and have the evidence to prove it. I'm not going to say I've never deliberately team killed somebody before, but that's the first time I've done it to somebody who didn't actually deserve it. I think the last time I team killed intentionally was on the patch 7.5 test server, and that guy definitely deserved it. 3002D driver didn't. He could have gone AFK for any reason. Could have had a family emergency, might have disconnected. I don't know. Well, anyway, by some miracle, I managed to survive. Not in a very good position though. Well, tactically, I am in a pretty good position. There are no longer any threats to me down here. I can spot these guys, but I don't have a lot of health left, and so I cannot hang around after taking a shot like that at the Tiger, especially with the artillery, particularly the Bishop, making it their mission in life to kill me and only me. I have to keep moving. Once I've fired that shot, I cannot hang around. So, knowing that artillery has a hard-on for me, because he definitely does, I don't really want to hang around behind this rock for the whole game, because he's going to be pre-aimed on the likely spots where I'm going to poke around. So I've got to get out of here. So I take a poke up there, Sixth Sense doesn't go off. I'm reasonably confident nobody is watching this side anymore. And rather than driving straight up, I go around the side to try to get some flanking spots off on any enemy defenders who might still be up on that ridge. And if Artie is still looking for me, and I'll bet he is, changing position like this means he's going to have to shift his aim, and it might give me that few extra seconds that I need to be able to maneuver after spotting an enemy target or after shooting at an enemy target, just to ensure I can continue to avoid the artillery fire. Oh crap. Okay, Jagdpanther spotted, didn't fully aim the shot, didn't want to take the risk. Just because I saw the Jagdpanther doesn't mean there wasn't anything else over there. And there we go. Artillery still very much taking an active interest in my health. 2.9 second aiming time with this 100mm gun. There is a very, very good chance if I had waited the full 2.9 seconds to ensure I hit that Jagdpanther, artillery would probably have hit me. Now I know he's going to be pre-aimed, and it's a Bishop, he's probably going to be reloaded, so I'm not interested in taking shots at that Jagdpanther, I just want to keep him spotted for our artillery. And the second I see him, keep moving. That Bishop can probably one-shot kill me. Oh, and again, move, 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 move. Use the slope of the hill, build some speed up. Just in the nick of time. It's almost as if I can see the future. Now, Quickie Baby's moving up in his Cherie. The Cherie only has 3 shots in the autoloader, and he probably doesn't have the damage output to finish off that Jagdpanther, so it's important that we work together to take this guy out. Quickie Baby started engaging him. I don't really have a shot from there. I'm taking a risk here because I know artillery is pre-aimed at me, but it's possible he shifted his fire when Quickie Baby popped up. But I've got to keep Quickie Baby alive, so totally worth the risk. But I've been spotted again. Got to get into cover. Unfortunately, I can't hide behind that rock from the Bishop because the M41 has a clear line of fire at me, so I just have to keep moving. Now it looks like the M41 took a shot at Quickie Baby instead, and Quickie Baby managed to finish him off. But that Bishop, he's nothing if not persistent. Now I'll probably have popped off his radar by now. There's the little bastard. Right. Oh, that felt good. If I could have killed him, it would have been better, but I'll settle for taking off 90% of his health. And he's trying to get away, so I have to rush that shot before he gets around the corner, and of course, it misses. But I'm spotted again, and I know this little bugger's got it in for me. And I think I'm safe behind that rock. But the little scumbag hits me again. Oh, I so wanted to kill that guy. But even though I would have loved nothing more than to strangle that little bastard with his own intestines, you can't afford to get tunnel vision. And Quickie Baby's killed him anyway. So now we need to find the rest of the enemy team. And from behind the cover of this bush, I spot the Sturrer and Mill. Unfortunately, crappy accuracy, 2.9 second aiming time. My shot misses. And even though firing gave my position away, that guy seems to be making more of a move on Quickie Baby, so while his attention is distracted, Quickie Baby's leading him around. I'm going to rush up behind him, and between the two of us, we're going to take this guy down pretty easily. Yep, that was pretty easy. So, it was looking pretty bad at one point, but now there's 3 of us versus that one KV-2. Now, while the KV-2 is entirely capable of one-shot killing every remaining tank on our team, we do have one big advantage over him, or certainly I do, because I've got coated optics fitted to this tank and it already has a 370 meter view range. With the coated optics, that puts my view range at over 400 meters. So the KV-2 who was last spotted over by the flag is probably going to be lying up waiting to shoot us as we try to cap. However, first he has to spot us. And provided we make intelligent use of cover, there's very little chance he's going to see us before we see him. And his only chance of winning this game is detecting us and getting the first shot off, and then pulling back into cover to take the time he needs to reload and kill us all one at a time. So being careful not to move through the cap circle, because that just tells him where we are. Confident that I have not been spotted, because my commander has 6th sense, we move up to where his likely position is going to be. And I seem to have found me a KV-2. Okay, he's got a 20-second reload. I have an 8.5-second reload. I take his tracks. He repairs his tracks. He's obviously still reloading. So I move up. Remember, I have very, very bad accuracy. Not as bad as his. And a very slow aiming time. Not as bad as his. But if I can get the chance to pre-aim on the corner for when he comes around, I'm always going to get the kill. So that was my ace tanker game in the T-34-1. Despite the fact that Quickie Baby got a very well-earned top gun and did more physical damage than me, I managed to earn the most experience, and that was down to doing over 2,000 spotting and assistance damage in that game, as well as the 2,500 damage that I did myself. And if the driver of the VK3002D is watching this video, I do apologise. You totally didn't deserve to get team killed. So I think I finally figured out what it is about the T-34-1 that I like and that I didn't like about the Type T-34 and the Type 58. And initially I thought it was because those tanks have bad gun depression, but the T-34-1 has exactly the same gun depression as the 2 previous tanks. I can make this work, but I couldn't make them work. And I think the reason, well, it's related to the gun depression, but that's not the whole story. It's the fact that despite the same terrible gun depression, this thing delivers all its damage in one shot, in a way that the 2 previous tanks didn't do. And if you've got crappy armour and crappy gun depression, the crappy armour doesn't help when the crappy gun depression is forcing you to reveal more of your tank than is safe, to actually point the gun at a target and start doing damage to it. And if your gun has low alpha damage and you're in that sort of situation, you have to stay exposed and keep firing at the target. And with the Type T-34, I was just taking more damage than I was doing. That doesn't happen with the T-34-1 for two reasons. One, it delivers all of its damage up front, so it doesn't have to stick its nose out for as long as you have to in the previous tanks. And two, it's actually got some good armour in the shape of that turret front, which is 170mm thick. So, I never thought it would happen, but I finally found a Chinese medium tank that I actually like, in the shape of the Tier 7 T-34-1. I have had a lot of fun driving this tank. I didn't hate it instantly, which is not something I can say about the Chinese medium tanks that came prior to this. Hopefully, I've shown you enough of the tank for you to be able to make your own mind up, and maybe, you never know, you'll be able to have some success with this thing too. As always, folks, take care on that battlefield, and I'll catch you next time.